With the recent spotlight on Miss South Africa with Chidimma Adetshina's withdrawal from the pageant, let's now delve deeper into how these events possibly might affect South Africa's international brand as well as reputation in the future. And for that discussion, we've roped in Tshepo Matseba, Managing Director at Reputation, a first group to speak more on this. Tshepo, great having you with us on the show. A very good afternoon to you. So I'm pretty sure that you have seen the drama as well as saga around the Miss SA contestant, as well as the issues pertaining to her identity or nationality. So let's first talk about how this might or might not have severely tainted not only the organizer's brand, but South Africa as a whole, and in what possible ways, you precise?
Yeah, it's been a difficult one to go through because the milestones and the steps through which we went through this, one would have preferred this to have been done differently, in the sense that on a step-by-step basis, at the basic minimum, we get the facts first. And I think the facts were coming, and they're still coming sporadically in bits and pieces. And that's been the beginning of the problem. Is that the responsibility of South Africa as the country, how this was communicated? Probably partly, but this is mainly the responsibility of the organizers in terms of how they go about vetting participants, and once those participants are vetted, how they communicate, how they keep records, how they keep information. Because if all the basics were done correctly from the outset, we wouldn't find ourselves in this position that we're in, where a minister has had to make a comment in public without necessarily also having all the facts. Yes, he raised an issue that raised an important debate, but it would have been much better had the facts been gathered, all the fact-checking been done beforehand, in advance, and because then you wouldn't have a situation where we get into this late stage in the game where we are only finding out key information. And even at this stage, we don't have conclusive information. I think the Department of Home Affairs explicitly said this is actually preliminary information, preliminary findings, but those prima facie findings are giving an indication that there were some activities that were untoward, and therefore in the end, we are where we are at now, where she actually withdrew.
Absolutely, Tshepo, there, and the organizers had, in fact, multiple times on public platforms reiterated the fact that they had indeed verified all the relevant information pertaining to the contestant. But what are some of the core issues then that should be focused on there, Tshepo? Because I'm sure you heard the insert preceding our interview. Chidimma Adetshina, they're saying, firstly, lies should not have been used and laws should not be broken. So indeed, if her mother committed fraud in acquiring the ID, then surely we need to be very unilateral in our approach when it comes to the issues directly affecting our immigration laws that might have been broken. So to simply focus on the subject, which was a contestant, does not address the real concerns of South African citizens, and that is purely on the issue that a mother and child somewhere in the country might have suffered a great deal because of this alleged fraud.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few important issues. The first is that the law must be respected, the laws of the country should be respected, and that should be followed through consistently. So there is no room there for any debate or conversation. We just simply need to follow the law to the letter. Now, there are incidents where allegations are raised that some of the officials at Home Affairs may be implicated, or the former officials, or some of the may be current, may be implicated in how this emerged. And we've seen different events, different people who were implicated before in the context of our Home Affairs facilities in terms of controlling the movement of people, but also this thing about identity documents just being dished out freely without the right procedures, illegal activity. And I think the message there as a country, we need to strengthen our capability to proactively deal with illegal activity activities, especially at Home Affairs. And then, of course, it cannot be that, we deal with this thing without dealing with it holistically. So obviously, from a reputation point of view, as an individual and as a family, of the person that we may call right now, the contestant that withdrew, whenever you find out that something went wrong in the context of your life, and it is then to proactively inform the relevant authorities about the information that you find. And the minute we do not disclose information proactively, we create space for speculation that who knew about this, who did not have knowledge of this, how much did the father know, much did the mother know, and to what extent, therefore, was what information withheld from the organizers of the competition, which made it difficult for the organizers to actually get the actually relevant level of rigor and insight so that they can make appropriate decisions. I don't know how the criteria is done and what checks and balances are done at White Stage, but we were given an impression that at least at the bare minimum, and the expectation is at least at a bare minimum to do the checks and balances, especially those of identity, isn't it? Because that's important. That links to that this is an individual who would be representing South Africa as a brand globally, and therefore not just the organizing committee or the organizing company. And therefore you expect that this is a South African and that the right checks and balances were done proactively, and that if the individual or their family knew something, that they would have articulated this proactively. And so at this stage, while we're still waiting for the final findings perhaps from the relevant authorities, especially the Department of Home Affairs, at this stage, it's encouraging that actually she took the initiative, even if it may seem like it's at a late stage, to withdraw.
Right.
And then we are aware that there are conversations locally and internationally about this.
Very quick one, Tshepo, and on that issue of discussions locally as well as internationally, I mean, what do you make then of the backlash arising from, of course, South Africa now being accused of being xenophobic, and whether or not this saga could then potentially lead to South Africa being sidelined or even cancelled from such events like the Nigerian organizer that is based in Mexico that had actually, in fact, retracted his invitation to the South African delegation. So bearing in mind also the totality of the situation.
Yeah, look, I think that it's unfortunate that people will link this directly to xenophobia in the context of South Africa. I think conversations on social media get charged and they get emotional, and they get emotional everywhere and anywhere in the world. It could, even if this was in Nigeria, it could have equally been emotional. So I don't think that you can actually scientifically say this is a country that's xenophobic as a result of the fact that people raised concerns. I think that should be we should be open-minded as a country, and I think organizers of different festivals, events are welcome to make their own decisions, and we can't decide on their behalf. But I guess that South Africa, if a particular event is of a critical nature and that it will impact the image of the country and that it will obviously also impact, it has economic value of sorts in terms of bilateral relations between South Africa and another country, the likelihood is that South Africa will have those discussions through DECO and the department, perhaps the Department of Arts and Culture in this context, to try and find each other. But South Africa, obviously, I doubt that we can dictate to private entities who they want to invite and who they don't want to invite. And I think some of it is unfortunate. I think we're becoming, the issue has become polarized with emotions instead of dealing with the facts. Because if I were in Nigeria and it was found that perhaps I'm a participant in a serious competition such as this one, and it was found that my identity was compromised, I would probably be at the airport back here in South Africa, deported as quickly as possible. So sometimes we need to be fair and consistent in our approach, especially as members of the African Union's 55 member countries.
All right, Tshepo, thank you so much.
Context.
Tshepo, thank you so much for your input and insights this afternoon. There, Mr. Tshepo Matseba, the Managing Director at One Reputation First Group, talking to us about, of course, the saga arising from the issues pertaining to the contestant, Ms. Chidimma Adetshina's entry into the Miss South Africa pageant.